of folks on point that are down to help out. And also, just to let you know ahead of time, we have a ton of links that we're going to be sharing throughout this training. Please don't stress yourself out trying to keep up with all of them. We will send these out in a document after this training, so sometime in the next 24 hours or so. Next slide. All right, we also want to cover a couple of community agreements here. We want to make sure that everybody's time is respected and that we are being respectful of one another. So we ask that everybody here engage with kindness. No racism, misogyny, xenophobia, or hate will be tolerated. Also, if something really resonates with you, feel free to drop a couple of plus signs in the chat to let us know that you're feeling it. Also, please limit the sidebar conversations and repetitive comments because they are a little distracting, especially for others who are trying to pay attention to our chat. And with that being said, we can move on to the next slide and go over a list of some of the trainings. These are some of the trainings that we have held this month already. The one you're attending here, obviously, is the online activism and social media advocacy. I see Ali has dropped the link to watch recordings of any of the trainings that you may have missed before. So if you're interested in any of these, please feel free to check them out using that link. But we do have the climate justice, equity in the Sierra Club. We have a lobbying training for lobbying for change, then a storytelling training on building power and building connections, and then creative activism. So ways to make your advocacy sparkle and shine. Next slide. And also this training will be recorded as well and will be available on that particular site once we're done. Cool. So let's take a minute and get introduced to each other. Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat using your pronouns if you're comfortable and location. My name is Jack Knoxville. I use he, him, and they, them pronouns. I am currently based in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is the occupied land of the Cherokee. And my role at Sierra Club is I am the distributed organizing technology manager in my acting role. And I'm gonna pass it over to Rebecca to introduce herself.
Looks like Rebecca might be having a small technical difficulty. So I will introduce myself. I'm Hillary Larson. My pronouns are she, her. I live in Denver, Colorado, which is the land of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute peoples. And I'm the Senior Digital Innovations Campaigner here with Sierra Club. And now passing to Rebecca, who looks like she was able to get off mute.
Can you hear me okay now?
There we go.
Awesome. Hey, I'm so glad to be here. My name is Rebecca. My pronouns are she, her. I work for the Hoosier chapter of Sierra Club here in Indianapolis, Indiana, which is the occupied land of the Miami, Kaskaskia, and Kickapoo people. And my role here at the state chapter in Indiana includes communications, fundraising, and volunteer coordination.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rebecca. And also our support team that's on this call is Ali, Zach, and Rachel. They're awesome folks who are here to help support you throughout our time together. So if you have some questions or need some support, keep an eye out for these three folks. They are here to help. Next slide. All right. So this is a bit of an agenda on the material that we're going to cover tonight. We have understanding the moment for the movement. We're going to demystify digital organizing for y'all and help you to understand that everybody here is an influencer, regardless of your audience size. And we will connect you with some ways to take action, as well as give you a few tips and tricks to protect yourself from cyberbullies and troublemakers online. Next slide. And also we will have possibly have some breakout rooms. So if you're interested in connecting with each other, we should have some time for that. So cool. And yeah, so if you missed our training on equity and justice earlier this summer, you should totally check it out. As I mentioned, it is available on that link of sc.org/recordings. But the Sierra Club is an organization that believes in the power of people working together to make change happen. We work toward a just, equitable, and sustainable future built on a foundation of racial, economic, and gender equity, where all people benefit from a healthy and thriving planet. And we ask that you also bring that into your work as we do this together. All right, next slide. And this is where I'm going to actually hand it off to Hillary.
Great, thanks, Jack. So as many of you know, this training is a part of our Summer of Collective Action, which if you don't know all the details, you can learn more about that at sc.org/summer2021. We're sharing lots of links in our chat today, so don't worry if you're not copying them all down. We'll send out an email tomorrow with all of the information. And I want to take a moment before we dive into these priorities to take a step back and acknowledge the things that we're fighting for this summer and onward are all too real. And a lot of the climate impacts are directly devastating many of our communities. There are likely folks on this call that have been directly affected by Hurricane Ida and other tropical storms, as well as the numerous fires in the West, droughts, heat waves that have happened this summer. There are also likely folks who couldn't come tonight for those reasons. So this work is really important and the consequences are very real. And I also want to celebrate where it is working. So just last week, the House passed a $3.5 trillion budget plan for the infrastructure package. That's a critical step in delivering bold investments that meet the scale of the crises in our communities that we're facing right now. So this is the reason we're doing this work, and it's critical to appreciate where we're able to make a difference. So there were 10 House moderates who threatened to not support budget reconciliation, and it was thanks to volunteer leaders and activists like everybody on this call, all 100+ of you, thank you for joining, who mobilized to make that happen. So thank you, thank you. The House also on the same day passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which is a key piece to strengthening our democracy, huge part of this work. These are big steps, and I wanted to share that news with the hope that it gets folks inspired to keep at it and start taking action if you're new. And there's still a lot of work to ensure that we're protecting our communities and creating more resilient future. And unfortunately, you know, a lot of these disasters aren't going to be preventable. So we have to work together to build back better. And so with that, we have the 7 priorities of our Summer of Action here. So the first one is to achieve 100% clean energy. The second one is to improve access to public transit and produce union-built electric cars, trucks, and buses. The third one is to end fossil fuel subsidies. The fourth one is to replace 100% of lead pipes. The fifth is to retrofit and electrify all public housing, schools, and hospitals. The sixth is to create a civilian climate corps and clean up abandoned mines and wells. And the seventh, which is, you know, in my mind, the most important of all, is to protect and strengthen our democracy by passing the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Okay, next slide. So, as many of you know, we are literally in the beginning of our week of action, which started on Saturday. It goes through Friday, 9/3. This is the moment, and it doesn't end on Friday. So if you can, I mean, the week of action ends on Friday, but our work doesn't end on Friday. If you can, attend or host a lobby visit or a house party this week. If you can't this week, you can attend a lobby visit or host a house party next week. If you're not sure how, we have had other trainings on how to get involved with that work. Many of you I know have joined them. We have all of our resources to get involved at sc.org/summer2021. And if an event isn't how you want to participate right now, that's okay. That's why we're here at this training talking about how we can take action digitally on social media. Okay, great. Next slide. All right, so let's dive in on a little bit more about how we can actually do that. So social media can mean a lot of things. In a little bit, we're gonna do a poll to learn and hear from you on what platforms you're actually on. And for now, I wanna touch a bit about what we as individuals and organizations are able to use these different platforms for. So right here, I'm laying out some different types of reasons for posts. And note that content isn't going to be just one of these things. You could post something that's all three of these things or two of these things, or it could just be one. These are just different. We can think about social in lots of different ways. These is just one way to think about like what kind of topics we might be posting around. So the first one is to educate. So you're sharing information with your community and followers. That could be a news article or a blog. It could be a fact graphic or a meme. Those are really popular on Instagram right now. The idea is to share information. And of course, we want to make sure that information that we're sharing is accurate and factual. And towards the end of the presentation, Jack will talk a little bit about misinformation and how we can make sure that we're not sharing anything that is incorrect. The second piece is engaging. So we're creating space for conversation. We're letting people, we're asking questions. We're letting people share their own personal stories, allowing them to speak up. Sometimes they won't agree with you, and that's okay. A respectful discussion could help bring them along, or it could help bring other people who are following the conversation along. And either way, it can create a space for learning. And the third, I think most important thing for me that we in like our organizations and that we personally are able to use social media for is to empower. So that's helping your audience understand how they can get involved right now, where they can take action, what they can actually do to mobilize and help solve the problems that we're facing. Okay, next slide. Great, so we're not gonna get too deep into specific best practices by platform on this call, as a lot of that really depends on where you're posting. But here are some tips that are helpful to keep in mind that hopefully are useful wherever you're gonna be, creating social content or engaging on social media. The first one is to add an image, whether that's a photo or a video. We do have some great graphics on our social guide that we have shared out and we'll keep sharing. That's sc.org/social. But you don't need to post our graphics. It can be even more engaging if you have a photo or piece of art that you've created or taken. That can be really powerful. So post a lot. So if you're on multiple platforms, post on all of them. Post every few days about this work when you're involved in it. Keep posting, keep engaging, keep asking questions. One post is great, but you're only going to reach so many people that in your community. So it's great to continue sharing about how you're involved, about the information, and that way you can share different kinds of posts as well. Okay, so be respectful. This is true for decision makers, and it's also true for friends and family. You want to try to be civil, even when someone is saying something that is really wrong or that you disagree with. There's a lot of good reasons, or they're being disrespectful themselves. There are a lot of good reasons to do this. And one of them that I find pretty impactful is that it really doesn't work. Social science has actually shown that fighting or being rude with people actually has the opposite effect of moving them to your point of view. It actually convinces them that they're right and backs them more into a corner. So it doesn't mean you have to agree when people are saying things that are not great. You can still counter misinformation. You can just try to do so respectfully. And then what I think is the most important tip on here is make sure we're getting our friends and family posting as well. So in a little bit, Jack's going to talk to you about scope of your influence. And we also know that everybody around you has influence as well. So 10 might be a big number, but the way we are able to build these movements is getting more people to start acting. So asking a few of your friends or community members to post as well is a great start to do that. And before we move on, just a quick tip for images. If you are attending a lobby visit or a house party or hosting, please take pictures, and you can share those with us at sc.org/share your picture. Okay, next slide. Great, so this is just a quote that I really like. It's just kind of reinforcing the idea that social media is dynamic and engaging. The idea is, yes, sometimes we are sharing articles or information, but the idea is to listen, engage, and build relationships. So really when we're using social, we're looking at it as community building, having conversations, and not just blasting things out at people. Okay, next slide. All right now we are going to share a poll because we'd love to know which social media platforms you are using. So I think That's going to be shared in the chat in just 1 second. Okay, so obviously you can put in multiple answers here. You can put in up to 5. There are lots of different things you could think of as social media. You may, you may automatically think of things like Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and Instagram, but it also could mean smaller local platforms like Nextdoor or chat apps like WhatsApp or Reddit or TikTok. So yeah, just if you have, if you have the bandwidth and connection, if you can just open up that link to take the poll, it's the menti.com one, and just put in 1 to 5 social medias that you are currently using or on or paying attention to. So hopefully that's working. It looks like the results aren't showing up. So if this is for whatever reason not working. Oh, there they are. They're showing up for me. Let's see.
Hillary, they are. You just have to unshare the screen, I think, to have it happen in real time.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to share the link so folks can click in and look at the results. Okay. Here. All right, so folks, click on that link. You can see the results, and folks, keep sharing. We're going to move on, but I would love it if anyone who hasn't added in, I see some folks are sharing in the chat as well. That's great. Oh, Wix, yeah, that could kind of be a social. So keep sharing in the chat, share in the poll. We'd love to see where folks are at. It's also really great for us to know where we should be engaging. So, okay, next slide. All right, I'm passing back to Jack now.
All right. Thank you so much, Hillary. Yeah, so I really want to take a minute. I know Hillary was just talking about influencers. And so I want to take a minute to talk about what influencers are and who influencers are. And really the answer to that is everybody's an influencer. Social media influencers are historically users that have large followings on major social networks, like some of the ones Hillary mentioned, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. But these folks use their social media profiles to share information around a topic that they're considered to be an expert on or have a passion for. And yeah, so like, just take a second now and think about, are there specific people that you follow? These people could be friends or family members, they could be celebrities or somebody you've only run across online. But yeah, feel free to drop a couple in the chat if there are folks that have influence over you or that you look to for influence. I see the Obamas, absolutely. Governor Inslee, all right, nice. And yeah, absolutely. So most folks believe that you have to have hundreds of thousands of followers in order to be an influencer, but you really don't, because you are already an influencer. When it comes to your own influencer status, the difference between you and being a Kardashian is the number of folks that you may have in your influence in your network. So think about the many friends or family members, community members, neighbors that are already following you on social media. These folks are essentially your audience, and they are already following you. They're already interested in whatever it is that you're saying and doing and sharing. So this is a great opportunity to share something meaningful with them. Next slide. And as you start to imagine, what type of content you're going to be sharing with these folks, it's also important to understand your ability to actually create influence and to impact change. This distributed organizing model is a great example of this and for demonstrating how others can also be influencers coming from your work. So the distributed organizing model is a community organizing strategy which moves us away from that traditional hierarchical kind of top-down approach into one where we can each be an integral part of the work that's being done, and it will allow us to even scale up that work. So in this particular example, each of us is the center cat, right? And like the friends or family members that we are connected with and we have influence, over are the folks that we're pointing out with the black arrows. Okay, those are our folks. And then the other cats stemming from around them, those are their folks, those are their friends, their family members. And at that point, they become the center cat. So it's just a great way for all of us to empower each other to move away from just being sympathetic supporters that are sitting on the sidelines to becoming active participants in the movement. So now that you understand what influencers are and how your influence comes to be, we're going to move into storytelling, and I'm going to pass it back to Hillary, who can show you how to use that story to build some power and build support.
Perfect. Thank you, Jack. I absolutely adore that cat influencer graphic. Okay, so for folks who attended, next slide. For folks who attended our storytelling training a couple of weeks ago, this should look very familiar. For folks who didn't, this is in our recordings deck at sc.org/recordings. So I'm not going to spend too much time on storytelling because we did a whole amazing training on it. But we are going to dive in a little bit about what a story is. So we can talk about storytelling on social media. So I want to note that not all great social has to be a story or a personal story, and that you can also absolutely be telling stories about the what and why of your issues that doesn't necessarily include anything personal about you. Sharing a personal story is just one tool in your toolbox of great social content. So what we went over 2 weeks ago was diving into 3 aspects of how we tell stories about the movement and our issues and how we get involved. So first, we have the story of self. The story of self is, how does this issue impact me? Why was I called to action? What got me involved? What is my personal narrative that would compel folks to act or support the work? Because, I'm resonating with this. This is why I got involved, and we want to bring other folks into that. The story of us is bringing them in. What does it mean to do this in community? So we'll talk a little later about audience and thinking through who you're posting for and why. That's super important when you're sharing the story of us on social media. So if a lot of you shared who your influencers were. I saw one person share your kids, like thinking about people on your social, like where are they coming from? What are their perspectives? And how can you talk about the story of us with values and language that might resonate to them? Same would be true for your decision maker. So you're going to frame things a little bit differently if you have an awesome progressive elected official that you're writing to, as opposed to if they're conservative. The story of now is just the urgency of the moment. So it's the opportunity to make a choice and to take action, and what is the action we need folks to take. Sharing stories can be really impactful to when we're lobbying and to legislators, and equally, if not more importantly, they can also move our friends and family members and community members to act or just start to learn and engage on the issue. Next slide. Okay, so these personal narratives and stories don't have to be super long and drawn out. They can be short, concise posts on social media platforms, like the examples on the screen. So I'll just quickly run through these 3 posts. They're just 3 of many examples out there. The one on the left is an Instagram post from Ashley, who is an amazing activist and creator. And this is about how she's experienced the climate crisis in different areas that she's lived. And it ends with how folks can join her in taking action. The story in the middle is a TikTok post from our friends over at EcoTalk. This is not a personal story. It's a narrative about the G7 summit, and it's important on impacting climate action, which, like I said, is still a great form of storytelling. And finally, the 2 tweets on the right are from our Sierra Club live event during the EPA Clean Cars hearing a few weeks ago. This shows that stories can be super brief and short. The one on top is lifting up the experience of a mother of 4. That's Molly. She works with Moms Clean Air Force. And the one on the bottom is from Catherine Garcia, the director of our Clean Transportation campaign. So each of these examples, provides different social media platforms for telling stories about how our audience can understand and interact with climate action. And I also want to note that stories, these are written because they're easy to share on a slide. Stories don't need to be written. I know many of you attended last week's creative activism training on creating art, poems, and graphics. Those are all great mediums to share a story. Okay, next slide. Great. So we've talked a little bit about what can work on social and what influence you have. So now we want to dive into actually figuring out who you want to impact and how. So for that, I'm going to pass back to Jack.
Thanks, Hillary. Next slide, please. Great. So let's do a little bit of power mapping. This is a good exercise that you can do right there at your desk or wherever you're sitting. Feel free to draw this out on a little piece of paper. Super simple. But basically, power map is lets you figure out who are the folks that have power, who need power, and then who is supportive and who's unsupportive. So in the first quadrant, think about it. Okay, when it comes to social climate justice, think about the folks who are supportive, that actually have power. Sometimes these can be like lawmakers and decision makers that are kind of rooting in our favor. Then who are the people that have power that are unsupportive? So like, who are the people we may need to target to bring over to the other side of the map? Then on the bottom left there, we have the folks who are supportive but need power. So these folks don't quite have power yet, but they are supportive of the causes. And then we have the bottom right is folks who are unsupportive and also need power. Now that last one can be a little tricky, and a lot of folks do stumble there sometimes when trying to figure out who that might be. But there are people who will advocate against themselves sometimes. Just maybe take a little second or two and do some personal reflection and think about folks that might apply to. All right, cool. So next slide. Just to piggyback on the power mapping, I will say power mapping is a great exercise because it really reminds us that we're not going to be able to truly move everybody. No matter how much we may want them to be, not everybody is going to be on our side. Not everyone is going to feel the way that you do, nor will everyone understand or agree with your perspective, even if you explain it 1,000 times. And this can be really frustrating and downright draining, especially when those immovable folks are the people that we love and care about the most, which does happen. And it really is. Sometimes it is the people that we are the closest to that just won't budge. So because of this, we want to remind you that it is okay to not focus on everybody, because it's important to protect your energy and your mental health, especially when it comes to having uncomfortable conversations like what can exist here. So if you find yourself fighting with somebody online and it's actually causing you real life distress, please take a break. Go for a walk, connect with a loved one, make yourself some tea, take a nice bath, connect with nature, spend time with your pets, reach out to a therapist or some other trusted mental health advisor. Do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. Because contrary to what we may have all been taught over our lifetimes, self-care is not a selfish act. It is actually a vital part of healing, and recognizing when to step back is also a sign of strength. Next slide, please. And I'm going to hand it back to Hillary, who's going to take it from here.
Great. Thank you, Jack. Yeah, I'm just going to also repeat the self-care note. It's so important. If we get burnt out, then we're going to be no good at advocating for our communities and on these issues. So it's a critical piece of this work. Okay, so a lot of times when we're posting, we're talking to friends and family and other folks in our community and our scope of influence. And sometimes we're posting specifically to reach decision makers. So in a second, Rebecca is going to talk a little bit about tagging and how we actually, touch on those folks. But I want to talk for now about how much influence we actually can have over decision makers on social media. So a little while back, the Congressional Management Foundation conducted a poll on how many comments on a decision maker social post or a topic is enough to get them to pay attention. This is from constituents in their district. As you can see, it's really not many. So 45% said it was 10 to 30, and 35% said less than 10. Think about that. Like if you got 10 friends who all live in the same district or state to post about something you care about on their wall, it could start to get attention of your member of Congress. That's pretty powerful. That's not a lot. So, 20% said more than 30. It's a little bit of a bigger bubble. Maybe we don't have 30 folks we can ask to post, but that's why we're building these communities as a movement. And, we're building this collective power together so that we do have that kind of ability. So couple of things to note about this is that 78% of congressional officials also said that if constituents are affiliated with a group like the Sierra Club or some of the other amazing groups folks are volunteering and engaging with, that would have some or a lot of influence, which is great. That means it's good to let them know where you're coming from, who you're working with. There is a caveat to all of this, that if members have already firmly come to a decision, so if they're like a champion on an issue for better or worse, this is probably not going to have as much sway. This is more if they're movable on the issue. This is really helpful to see that when we're talking about these issues online and we're tagging our decision makers and they're seeing those posts, that really is a important and powerful way to use our collective power. So how do we do that? Next slide. So here are some tips on how we actually can communicate with our members of Congress. I've said constituent a couple of times now, I think. If you don't know what that means that for your House representatives, you live in the region in your state that they represent. And for your 2 state senators, it means that you live in their state. So for example, I live in Denver, Colorado. Diana DeGette is my House rep, and John Hickenlooper and Michael Bennett are my 2 senators. If you don't know who your representatives are, that's completely fine. There's a way to find that out. If you just go to govtrack.us/Congress/members, you can look that up based on where you live, and we're sharing that in the chat, and we'll share that out with our resources. So your local and your local state legislators are the elected officials who your voice has the most impact on. Let's make sure we're giving them ask and we're engaging with them. Other things to include when you're posting is to make sure, like I said, you're tagging them. You can look up their handles on whatever social media platform you're posting on. You want to say, like we already talked about, if you're affiliated with the group, Sierra Club is great if you tag us in your posts. But if you're working with any other organizations, again, this is a movement. We're doing this collectively. We are all powerful together. Definitely be using this content and engaging other organizations that you work or volunteer with. You also want to say, if you have any identities that would be powerful in moving your decision maker, whether you're a student, union member, teacher, parent, nurse, farmer, small business owner, there's a lot of things. You want to make it personal and speak from the heart. So, maybe you live in a region that's been affected by a forest fire or a drought. That's important info to share. Talk about what you're afraid of. Talk about what you're hopeful and excited for. Just try to, be real, be a person, resonate, speak from the heart about your actual experiences. And then you want to make sure that you're including an actual ask in there. So I think a lot of times, I think we've talked about this a little in other trainings, especially lobby visits. We go in and we share all this great information and we forget to actually ask our representative to do the thing. Fortunately, it's a little bit easier when you're on social. You have some more time. You're not in any rush. No one's trying to distract you from the ask. But just make sure that you're actually asking them to do something. So for our Summer of Collective Action, it's support a bold climate infrastructure plan and democracy reforms. And of course, you're absolutely welcome to ask about something specific or local or otherwise relevant. Okay, so I'm going to pass over to the next slide and to Rebecca.
Hey, yeah, so as Hillary said, that she gave some great tips for posting to your congressperson. But not all of your posts are going to be to your congressperson, right? So if we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so, sorry, previous slide, to tag or not to tag, there we go. So have an intended audience, is this something that you'd want your mom to engage with or share, your best friend, or your congressperson indeed? So just keep that person in mind when you're making that post. Another thing we like to keep in mind is that when it comes to commenting or engaging on other people's pages, make sure that you're not duplicating their work or indeed speaking over them. This is especially true if you've got a local grassroots organization or activist that's already actually doing similar work or has a similar call to action. You can consider lifting that up instead of tagging them or posting on their own page, because some folks, they've been doing this kind of thing for a while, and they may have, especially important if they have lived experience of the issues that you're talking about. Because as Hilary mentioned earlier, we all have our personal narratives and our personal stories to share, but other people do too, and we need to make sure that we can respect that narrative too. Okay, next slide. Awesome. So how hashtags work? So they won't work if you use spaces, symbols, or punctuation, which is a bit painful if you're big into your grammar, but it's just something we have to live with. So use letters and numbers only. Another important thing to note is that if your posts are private, even if you use a hashtag, only people you're connected with will see it, which is fine if your intended audience is your family and friends, like your immediate sphere. But for example, if you're wanting an organization that you're working with, like Sierra Club, to see your post, or indeed a congressperson or another person that you're trying to influence, they won't see it if your privacy settings are locked down. So on Instagram and Twitter, your profiles would have to be public on there. On Facebook, you can change individual posts. So it's really up to you, where you feel most comfortable with your privacy settings, but it's a really good idea to take a look and go through those privacy settings and just make sure that they're where you want them to be for those posts. And if you're posting about, so don't be too obscure with hashtags, that's the other thing. Be original, obviously, but make sure that they make sense to the topic. And if you're posting about the summer of collective action, which we hope you will be, use the hashtag change powered by people, so others who are doing this work can see your posts. But don't worry about memorizing the hashtag now or any of the links. As we said, we'll be sending those out. So, okay, next slide, please. So you got this. I know it sounds like a cat poster, but it's true. I don't know if there are any other Lego movie fans out there, but I couldn't resist this quote because it's so true. Believe in yourself and your power to influence change. So in a little moment, we're going to be going into some breakout rooms. And in those breakout rooms, we're going to be asking folks to share their strengths. So really think about what it is that makes you the most talented, most interesting, most extraordinary person in the universe, capable of amazing things. Are you an artist maybe, or a graphic designer, a writer? Maybe you like being on video, maybe you enjoy going on Facebook Live. And really, you don't have to be a pro at something. That's the most important thing. You just have to be passionate about it and real, as Hilary said. That's really important thing, is just be true to yourself with these things. It's also really fun to try a few different ways and see what folks most engage with. Maybe there's something new you want to try. This is a good opportunity to do that. For example, I am what's politely termed, I believe, as an elder millennial. I've yet to dive into TikTok. It's not something I have done yet. So maybe that could be something, maybe this is a chance for me to enter the world of TikTok, possibly have mixed results, but maybe I can broaden my palette with that. The important thing to remember is no one's expecting perfection, or for all of us to become influencers, like professional influencers overnight. That's really not what this is about. The idea, as Hilary said earlier, is to educate, engage, empower, and hopefully we'll have some fun doing it, right? Okay, next slide. Okay, so in a moment, we will go into break.
That I can share in the chat.
Sounds great. Thanks, Hilary. Cool. All right. I also want to say that we will have some ways that you all can stay connected with us. And so even if all of your questions don't get answered tonight, we will work with you to make sure that we do get them answered for you. So, all right, cool. So yeah, we want to give you a chance to practice your new skills on social. This is something you can do tonight after our call, or if you want to do it sometime tomorrow. Just real simple process is writing your story, sharing that story on social, and then using the hashtag that we've mentioned a few times, which is change powered by people, so that we can actually find your post. Use the skills that you've learned during our storytelling training to let your audience know why supporting the infrastructure bill is personal to you. Remember, it doesn't have to be longer than a few sentences, like in the examples that Hillary shared earlier. Some of them were just that, a couple of very short sentences, maybe including a photo and like personalizing it. And then again, share that story on your favorite social media platforms. There is no wrong answer for which platform you're using. It's whatever platform feels the most comfortable for you. I mentioned this just a little bit ago while folks were in the breakout room, but if you are somebody who is a more visual person, maybe Instagram is more of your platform, and that's totally cool. If you have a bigger network of folks on Facebook and you feel more comfortable there, that's all right too. It really is about where you are and where you feel comfortable, and reaching out to your network. Also, bonus points if you at 3 of your friends and get them to share their stories as well. All right, next slide. So we do want to make sure that you're staying safe while you're online. So in order to protect yourselves from those cyber stalkers, hackers, trolls, and other troublemakers that are out there in the interwebs, we want you to feel empowered to walk through the privacy settings, which I know Rebecca has mentioned a few times. Every single one of the social media platforms that are out there does have its own custom privacy settings. I highly encourage you to find whichever platform you're on and most comfortable with to go through and set those settings for yourself. Yeah, so like maybe it's making your posts only available to your friends or whatever. But too often we get caught up in the heat of the moment when arguing on social media. So there's also some other ways you can protect yourself. So like when somebody disagrees with you, as Hillary mentioned, be civil. Don't respond to rudeness with rudeness. It really just opens the door up for more of those types of inflammatory attacks. And if or when things begin to escalate, please take a break. Also, the mute or block feature that sites like Twitter and Facebook have in place are there so that you don't have to continuously subject yourself to abusive behavior. And if you're commenting on someone else's post, like if you see an article or a story on somebody else's social media, and the content of that post itself is already triggering, your best bet is to not scroll down and read the comments and get involved there. Don't stray from the reason why you went to that post anyway. Like, say what you need to say, focus on that point, and try not to allow yourself to get pulled into the hate machine that's out there. Okay, next slide. It's also important that all of us take an active role in stopping the spread of misinformation. So where do you find reliable content? Well, trusted, unbiased news platforms like Newsy, the Associated Press, BBC, scientific journals, these are all great sources of information. Also, other nonprofits and organizations like Sierra Club, Greenpeace, World Wildlife, they're all also great sources of information that we know are going to be factual. And then government resources are also helpful. It's important, if you're going to share a story about like a story of impact, it's good to share that information from actual experts and folks who are talking about their own lived experiences rather than somebody who has no experience on the topic that you're talking about. Yeah, so cool. Next slide, please. And I'm going to actually pass this back to Hillary.
Great. So this is wonderful. I really appreciate all of the questions folks are asking. And I know this probably looks familiar, this slide, we already had it on here. I just wanted to remind you one more time that this is the week of action and we're in a pivotal moment. So make sure you visit this map. It's sc.org/map to take or join an action near you. There's still plenty of time to host an event. That might be a learning edge. You might be like, oh, I'm not ready for that yet. Just give it a try. It's a really great opportunity to push yourself to step into a new form of organizing. You don't have to try to squeeze it in before the week of action is over. You can still do it next week or the following weeks. We have lots of work to do. Either way, regardless of what you're doing, definitely engage in social. We'll share some sample text and you can find lots more posts on our guide. And obviously, if you're, as mentioned many times, if you're hosting an event or attending an event, to make sure to share about it and share your pictures with us. Next slide. Like I said, we still have work to do after this week, so don't disappear. We're gonna be sharing more information in the coming weeks about infrastructure and our democracy bills and what we need to do to pass them. So in a second, we'll share information for our Slack space so you can stay in the loop. And obviously, you're able, if you want to express interest in hosting your own action party or lobby visit, if you don't already have that link, it is sc.org/organize. So definitely, like I said, give that a try, but I understand not everyone's ready, not everyone feels comfortable. So no pressure, no worries if you're not there yet. Next slide. All right, so like I said, this is our last training, but it's not the end of our collaboration or coordination or, working together and in our communities to solve and take action on all of these issues and all the work that we have to do. So we can keep the conversation going at sc.org/Slack. It's a communication tool that we're using to bring our volunteers from across the country together to build community and learn from one another. If you've never used Slack before, that's okay. You can always join and ask for some guidance when you get there. Or if you can't figure out how to join, you can email mobilize.support@sierraclub.org. If you don't really, I've tried Slack, I don't like it, it's not for me, that's okay. You can still be a leader in the work without using the platform. It's just a great way to connect with other volunteers and continue building community and learning from one another. And I'm going to pass to Jack to wrap up, and I'm also going to share a sample social post with you all in the chat as kind of homework. But obviously, if you have your own story to share or your own content, you don't have to use this post. It's just an easy one for folks who are like a little nervous to get started.
Thank you so much, Hillary. And yeah, thank you all so much for being a part of tonight's training. We are super excited that you have joined us on tonight's call, and we hope that we have given you the tools that you need to take action right away, whether that's jumping in tonight and sharing a post that's already been created for you from the toolkit Hillary sharing out, or if it's you sharing your own personal story on your own social media pages. We're here to support you. As Hillary mentioned, we do have a great community space on our volunteer Slack. So I hope you'll join there where we can continue the conversations and really help you all power up some of that social media experience. And yeah, so we do have a few minutes for questions. Yeah, if y'all want, let's take like 5-10 minutes. We'll answer some questions and then we'll call it a night. So if you have a question and you would like to ask that aloud, please